Our second fireside chat today is with Stu Frost. Stu, you've been doing some exciting things in this space with your startup. Could you give us a little bit of background about what you and your company are doing?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Emre. Thanks for having us on this great session as well. It's awesome to see so many people engaged with this. So it's good to have people on the journey with us, right? I'm a long-time serial entrepreneur, started many companies in data modeling, data management, including one that was bought by Microsoft. So I spent a couple of years at Microsoft. Spent the last 10 years or so coming up with lots of different AI-driven companies, mostly industrial and healthcare related. And I saw recurring problems. One is we're just not productive enough in building these kind of solutions, right? There aren't enough people to build them all. And the other is that we're not doing it very well. We're basing too many systems on correlations. So I started researching that, and like you guys, came across Pearl's work and decided to build a whole platform based on that. So the end result is Geminos Causeway. So as indicated by the name, it's a whole kind of platform based on causality. And you should really look at it as a low-code development platform touting AI-driven solutions, CPGs, that kind of thing, all kinds of industrial problems, with causality all the way through, right from let's capture the business problem, like Jason was just saying, all the way through to let's understand how this newly digitalized business is running. Is it doing what we expected? Can we improve it? Underpinned by the whole causal science that we've been talking about. We've integrated DoY and EconML so far. So what you have is a very graphical environment to draw DAGs, to analyze them using DoY, EconML, and also Causal ML. We've integrated the Uber library as well. And we'll be adding things like ShowYN as well to help people capture the causal problems in the first place, and then directly generate applications from that. And it's all built into an open source platform called Node-RED. So it's a low-code development platform, originally designed for IoT applications, which are event-driven, so a good fit for kind of style of causally driven applications. It's available now, and very keen to get people using it. We've got some interesting projects going on, and be happy to talk at a high level about a few of those as well.
Very exciting. I'm curious. I want to dive in. So you've had a pretty broad experience with both your past companies and now with working together on these projects with some of your customers. One of the things I wanted to ask you was what you're seeing when you talk to these customers. So you've done the work to understand these causal methods. What are what's the key challenge that your customers are facing, and like how are you thinking about bridging that gap to help them solve their problem with these methods?
So that's a really good way of putting it, and we actually use kind of mind the gap, the English underground thing to highlight this. I think there's a major problem in developing these kind of solutions, which is the gap between business knowledge and data science. And all too often, we just don't have a common language, right? And I think that causal modeling, as the previous guest highlighted, is a great way to actually solve that problem. Now, of course, it's not easy, and we've got to avoid getting people bogged down in the math and so on. But actually, what we're finding is that business users are pretty smart at understanding what is going on in their world and what it causes them to do. So at a fundamental level, just getting them going with the way of thinking about it, it's not as hard as we might have thought. I think one of the big challenges is that as soon as you get into the literature, you're bombarded with math, right? And it's off-putting. And I think, as the previous guest said, we need a process, end-to-end process and a methodology that helps us get through those hurdles, helps the business users and subject matter experts express what they need without getting too bogged down, but then have continuity of that model expression into the data science. So we're not throwing out what they've expressed. And I think that's, for me, is the main promise of all this work that we're doing collectively on causality, to bridge that gap and finally have a common language that we can use.
That's a great way of putting it. Of that you're working on creating that common language that connects the business side to the data science side with these methods. And I'm really thrilled to hear that you're saying that actually once you're able to do that, the concepts come through clearly. That that people seem to understand. Um, what?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think it's true to say at the moment that we're certainly talking to early adopters, right? People
Mhm.
who've read the book, the book of why, etc., and they're looking for ways to use this within their companies. So we typically have champions. I mean, literally today, I was talking to another startup guy. I'd never met him before. We were just talking about a common advisor, and he said, "Oh, I've read Pearl's book. I'm a big fan." And it's amazing how many times that happens. So I think the community is growing, and
Mhm.
we're definitely right now selling to early adopters and helping them, I think, to sell internally to the business, right? And get the early results without getting too carried away with it. And while we're doing that, build out this methodology and the proof points for why this is ultimately, I think, a much better way of going about solving these problems.
I have a bit of a nuts and bolts question. Maybe this is feel like shifting gears a little bit, but I'm
Mhm.
also hoping that it'll help prime maybe some of the breakout discussions coming up. So obviously, we're interested in learning about use cases for these tools and how we can make them better. And some of that is really not only about the use cases, but maybe at many different levels, mechanical and stuff as well. I'm curious, since you I think have been working to integrate DuI and EconoML into your platform. I'm curious if you could say a little bit about maybe how it's what's worked well and maybe what hasn't.
Mm.
Where what could we be doing more of perhaps to help folks like you build on top of this ecosystem.
Well, that's an interesting. Can I give you a whole roadmap for the next couple of years? uh, I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think what we're not exactly struggling with, but really kind of working on is understanding the key roles in the team, right? Those multidisciplinary teams that we're talking about. So the subject matter experts, they want to express cause and effect structures without getting into the math. And then, of course, the data scientists not want to use the math to actually test those models, make sure they're valid, make sure they make sense, etc., and ultimately use them as a framework for their building a solution, right? So I love the way you've started to articulate this as the kind of end-to-end pipeline. So, and we're in many ways kind of operating at the next level of abstraction, right? Trying to understand how to capture the business needs, how to express those, how to interface that to the various tools that you guys are building. So I think everything that we can do and anything that we can do to help clearly delineate between those roles
Mhm.
while giving them that common language and reducing the friction between the two. I think that's going to be key in really making this work.
That's really a great insight. Thinking about the fact that we are building tools not just for a single person, but for a team coming together, like you said, in an interdisciplinary way.
Mm. And I think it doesn't stop there either.
Hmm.
As I mentioned earlier, we've got this vision, we haven't built it fully yet, but to actually, given that the causal models are central to the architecture of the solution, we want to actually monitor the running solution as well. So the pipeline doesn't stop when we say, here's a solution, go run it. We can actually understand what's going on in the running business. And I think that's an area that we'd love to collaborate with Microsoft Research on to really understand, okay, we're gathering metrics on these running systems, it's, microsets, etc., so we can do all that. But what do they really mean? How can we then feed that back to the business and the data scientists, say, here are different interventions you might try. Here are things that are going differently than you expected. Is that good, bad, indifferent? What do we do about it?
Hmm.
I think that's going to be a really interesting area of research going forwards.
Yeah. Speaking of going forwards, you've got projects on your plate. You're looking for customers. Um, how are you identifying and kind of prioritizing the kinds of problems that you think um, are the ones that, where you're going to be able to have the most impact and really make things well? I'm wondering if you have advice for, other folks in the community about how they can go and recognize that this is the place I want to start using these methods, or this is, just right.
That's a really fascinating question, obviously, for any startup, right? It's just getting going, and especially when you're selling to early adopters, because let's face it, this is not a mainstream concept yet by any means. So we're both looking for the early adopters and nurturing them. And it's, synergistic, hopefully. We're certainly, tackling some pretty sizable, complex problems. Like palm oil sustainability, for example, right? And what causes problems like forced labor and peat burning and so on, big, world scale problems that are beyond even one company to solve, right? They're industry-wide problems. So they've been fascinating to learn about and capture information about, and also look for appropriate data, right? And I do think that part of the challenge for a lot of these things is the movement that's somewhat in parallel of all of us that says just throw more data at the problem and we'll figure it out. I actually think that causal modeling is a great way to go about really understanding what the most important data is. Let's face it, one of the problems that we have in all of these projects is data quality. And if every piece of data is deemed to be useful, then we've got a massive data quality problem. So in some ways, narrowing that down by understanding the problem a bit better is I think, very valuable. So looking for projects that, help us understand all those things. It's not easy. One that's fascinating that we haven't seen any data on, as you'll understand, is a certain US defense-related organization looking at misinformation, disinformation. Which is a very hot topic right now, and how they might intervene to get better outcomes. And so it's not just a matter of identifying what is misinformation, which obviously can be quite subjective, but then also how might we intervene to change the outcome. So that's a really fascinating one. Supply chain optimization as well. It's obviously something that a lot of classic, ML, DL type technologies have been applied to. We've got a project going right now and hopefully we can generate a much better outcome, right, by using this approach. So yeah, lots of different things. We're generally, I would say, getting drawn to supply chain problems, partly I think because that is a hot topic right now. A lot of organizations are struggling with that and realizing that classic approaches haven't really helped them. But, we're certainly open to other ideas as well. So yeah, casting a fairly wide net at the moment.
Cool. It's been great talking with you, Stu, about your experiences. I'm excited to see where Geminos goes, and the complexity of problems you're tackling in like the supply chain and palm oil example are really it's thrilling to see those types of real world issues being tackled.
Yeah, I noticed that some of the people, I think Darren is actually working on trafficking and so on, right? Or done some work on trafficking. And that's a really interesting aspect of the particular problem that we're tackling there. So I reached out to Darren earlier to suggest that we might collaborate on that one. Yeah.
Very good to hear that those connections are being made.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us, Stu. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Of course, anytime. Thank you.
Thank you.